On September 25th, 2023, the U.S. national debt hit $33.1 trillion for the first time ever. Yep, that's trillion with a T. What's going on?
If you look at this historically, it's even more eye-opening.
On the very same day in 2020, the U.S. national debt was $26.89 trillion, compared to year 2000, where it was hovering around $5.6 trillion. As you can see, we aren't trending in a great direction here.
Even worse and even more sudden is the fact that when we dive into the forecast from some of these respected analysts, you'll find that our national debt is on track to top $50 trillion by the end of this decade.
That's pretty scary, even more so when you realize the U.S. is one of the most indebted organizations in the entire world.
We are in the middle of a debt crisis in Congress that's hanging over our heads.
And even if newly passed spending cuts takes effect, the reality of the situation is like all compounding debt. Our national debt is going to keep growing, especially when you take into account things like Social Security safety nets and like pretty gnarly interest on the debt itself.
All you gotta do is turn on the TV, scroll through social media or your favorite news app, and you'll find more than your fair share of conversations and threads about how serious this situation really is and the bleak outlook for the U.S. in general if you don't pay off this nasty debt.
The surging national debt has even been called by some as a national security threat.
This debt situation has been considered by many as robbing Peter to pay Paul, setting up future generations for failure as a trade-off for present-day economic stability. But is that true?
By the end of this episode, you will understand how national debt stacks up against ordinary household debt,
whether debt drives the economy.
Most importantly, if there's ways that you can benefit financially from national debt.
But first, let's examine this through the lens of Disney Maleficent. In the 2014 movie, you learn all about the backstory to the villain of Sleeping Beauty. Like a lot of us, Maleficent was a fairy who was kind-hearted and simply misunderstood.
The same can be argued with our national debt. Stephanie Kelton, a professor of economics and public policy at Stony Brook University, as well as a New York Times bestselling author of the book The Deficit Myth, which suggests that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the U.S. debt.
The reason people fear Maleficent was because they simply didn't understand her, and as a result, view her as a threat.
Have you ever thought about this in other aspects of your lives? Fear shows up in a lot of different ways, from fear of unknown, to fear of failure, to fear of loss of control, even fear of other beliefs and other cultures.
The best way to overcome fear caused by a lack of understanding is pretty simple. And one we talk a lot about it, right? Is educate yourself.
For starters, according to Kelton, there's a big difference between our personal loans and debts and those of the U.S. government. Think about it this way. The government is the issuer of the dollar, so they're in a really unique position because they're more than capable of paying their dues.
Unlike you and us, the government can settle its debt using the very currency it creates, ensuring it doesn't face the financial dilemmas as ordinary citizens.
In simple terms, the federal government is not restricted by the necessity of earning money to pay off its obligations because it possesses the power to creating its own currency.
So look, the government can generate the funds it needs for anything really, including debt. This means that the government will never face insolvency or rely on external borrowing.
Another way to look at it is think of it as like a community potluck. If the government brings 10 sandwiches to the community picnic, but they only take back 9 for its own officials, there's 1 extra sandwich left for the people.
So even though the missing sandwich is considered a shortage, right, by the government, it's like an unexpected treat for the rest of the attendees.
What happened next? Well, whether the people share the sandwich, save it for later, or give it to someone else in need, affects the mood and energy of the picnic. In this case, the mood and energy represents our economy's performance, which is measured by GDP.
Isn't that a bit easier when you think of it in terms of a sandwich, huh?
Let's pause for a second and clarify that in no way are we saying that U.S. should just continue printing checks without facing any consequences. That would be irresponsible.
Most people think taxes are only there to generate more income for the U.S. government. But taxes do more than just fund the U.S. government's activity. They also have a hand in influence how people behave depending on what the government policies and what it wants to encourage.
They can provide incentive like tax break for use of electric cars, or they can stop higher taxes for cigarettes to deter smoking.
But beyond that, taxes also step in to help manage inflation, which is when things get more expensive.
By siphoning some money out of the system, taxes can help keep the economy from getting too hot and bothered with rising prices.
Think of running an economy a bit like taking care of a balanced and slightly delicate ecosystem. When there's an excess on one thing, it can throw everything out of whack.
Now, when the US builds up its big debt, the temptation might be to just crank up the printing press to have more dollars tackle the debt.
But if you flood the market with way more dollars than there's actual things to buy, you start to see prices creeping up, aka our friend inflation. The big worry here isn't just the government's debt, but how everything else has become pricier, from your daily bread to buying a house.
Now, in times like these, things that you can touch and see, like land, gold, and real estate, become super important. They tend to keep their value or even go up when inflation's on the rise.
When regular money starts feeling iffy because there's too much of it and prices are climbing, you start to see a switch trends to these tangible assets as kind of like a financial safety cushion.
These assets, they don't get swayed by economic rules or a flurry of new money being printed, so they're a solid choice when things feel shaky. Take multifamily apartments, for example. They're another form of real estate investment that offers something that you can see and touch.
But what's special about them is that they bring in a steady stream of income.
Think of it this way. If you're a homeowner with a fixed mortgage, your monthly payment stays the same, but you don't have a part of your income that can actually go up with the market.
On the flip side, those who own multifamily apartments properties get the best of both worlds. They have the predictability of fixed mortgage in most cases and the exciting income possibilities from renting.
As the market goes through its ups and downs, especially when prices are climbing, rents tend to go up as well. And when tenant leases come due, landlords get to tweak the rent rates to keep pace with what's happening in the market.
This kind of flexibility can really come in handy when the economic landscape is shifting quickly.
When you think of things like utility bills, maintenance, and other expenses starting to go up, landlords can often balance this by raising rents a bit. Let's look at a real-life example of a multifamily apartment complex we own in Rogers, Arkansas. Even with all the talk of US debt going through the roof, inflation rising, and interest climbing, our property's financial situation continues to trend upward.
Right now, we're seeing a 12% boost in lease renewals compared to this time last year. This is a perfect illustration of how a smart investor like us and you can make the most of the current situations and come out on top even when others might be feeling anxious or uncertain.
Now that you have a grasp on why you don't want to wait for the US to clear its debt for your investments to thrive, check out this video where we share how to get rich faster in real estate.